Hello, welcome to another episode of Beeville Live. I'm your host, Christina Neely. Today is Fat Tuesday, or Shrove Tuesday as some people know it, and that is the day before Lent. So New Orleans is famous for its Mardi Gras. That's why I have my Mardi Gras beads on. And they are also famous for their king cake. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the history of Mardi Gras and king cake, and then we're going to make a king cake today. And I think you're going to like my recipe. Super easy, it's low fat, and I cut a lot of the steps out so it'll be really streamlined. I saw recipes online for king cake that was made with reduced fat crescent dough. It looked pretty disgusting, and I really kind of like to stick to traditional dishes. So I wanted to tell you about Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras started originally in Mobile, Alabama in 1703, and then it was moved to New Orleans. It was based on the medieval tradition of feasting, and you do the feasting before you do your fast on Ash Wednesday. And as a Catholic, you fast on Ash Wednesday and Friday and all Fridays in Lent. Particularly important are Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And Fridays in Lent you eat fish, and traditionally just one meal on Fridays, and especially Good Friday and Ash Wednesday. So the day before the fasting, you want to get rid of all your high-fat things like butter, milk, eggs, things like that, because you're supposed to be eating lean during Lenten season and reflecting. So Shrove Tuesday was known as Fat Tuesday. Sometimes they serve jelly donuts and things like that. But today we're going to make a traditional king cake. And the three colors we're going to be decorating with are purple, green, and gold. Purple stands for justice, green for faith, and gold for power. So I think you're going to enjoy the cake that we make today. And as I said, it's super easy. So I started some of the prep ahead of time, and I'm going to show you what I did. So first I took a cup of powdered skim milk, and I added 4 tablespoons of butter to that and melted it in the microwave. They usually tell you to simmer on the stove, but you don't have to do that. Put it in the microwave for 2 minutes, the butter melts, okay? And then you're also going to need yeast, which you can see mine has totally proofed and is spilling over. 2/3 of a cup of warm water, 1 ounce of yeast, and a tablespoon of sugar. And I was worried that my yeast was old, but obviously it's not. As you can see, it's quite healthy. Okay, so we're going to get started. So first, you're going to take 2 eggs, which I have over here, and I'm going to pour them in here. To save time, I cracked the shells, and I'm just going to beat those up real quick into my bowl so you can see what's going on. Okay, into that mixture, I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. I'm also going to add a teaspoon of cinnamon. I didn't have nutmeg, but you can add cinnamon instead. I had a delicious version of king cake last night, so I'm going to try and recreate that, but making it a little bit less fattening than what I had last night. And I'm also going to add some vanilla to this because I like the flavor of vanilla when I'm baking, and I think it's going to make for a delicious cake. Now I'm also, so I have my cinnamon, or you can use nutmeg. I have my 2 eggs and my salt. I'm also adding half a cup of sugar. Now from this sugar I had taken 3 teaspoons and added it to my yeast. So you don't need any more than that, so you can cut back on your sugar. Okay, I'm going to beat that all up. Smells wonderful with the cinnamon and the sugar and the vanilla. Okay, and my milk has cooled sufficiently after it came out of the microwave. You want to make sure that your milk has cooled, otherwise you're going to be cooking your eggs and they'll curdle. Okay, and if that happens, you'll temper your eggs, but this was cooled sufficiently, so I'm okay. Now, a lot of people don't know how to get their yeast to proof. It's very, very easy. You're just going to add warm water and that would be temperature warm to your hand, your yeast, your ounce of yeast, and you can see it looks like an overflowing root beer float, and your sugar, and that's going to really help it get going. So as you can see, that was pretty active yeast I had going on there. Use my fingers to get it going, and kind of made a mess here. All right, I'll switch over to my big spoon, and I'm going to mix all that liquid around. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Now, at first, you're going to think that the recipe seems daunting because there's so many ingredients, but what I do when I look at a recipe, I break it down into steps to make it easier. So as I said, I put my butter and my milk in 1 cup, and then my yeast and water and sugar mixture in another cup, and then my eggs and sugar, salt and cinnamon, and it makes it easier when you break it down into small steps. So let me get this out of the way. Okay. So next, now we have our liquid, and you can see it's pretty liquidy here. And next we're going to add our flour. Now, the recipe I was working with called for 4 to 5 cups of flour, and it was just white flour, but I like to try and make everything a little bit healthier. Since February is also Heart Healthy Month, I want to try and make this as healthy as possible. I cut out a lot of fat in this recipe. I didn't use whole milk, and I cut a substantial amount of butter out, and I'm not using cream cheese, but it's going to be just as good because I'm going to add some other flavorful ingredients and make this really healthy king cake. So what I did was I used 3 cups of white flour and 1 cup of whole wheat flour, so I can make that a little bit healthier. So I'm going to add a cup at a time, and eventually I'm going to start using my hands to knead this, but at first you can just stir it in. Now, if you have a hand mixer with dough hooks, you can use that. And I do have one, but I like to get the exercise of kneading dough, and I kind of like that. And what's going to happen is you're going to stir this in and knead it, a cup at a time until you can't move it anymore and it becomes a soft dough. And then you're going to let it rest and cover it for an hour and a half. Okay, so I'll put the ingredients at the end of the recipe, and you will be able to do this on your own. I'm hoping to get it posted early enough so you can make one tonight for your family. And also traditional on Tuesdays during Lent for Shrove Tuesday is to make pancakes. So I'm going to actually be making blueberry chocolate chip pancakes later today to go with our cake, and a nice fruit salad on the side, so we can have something healthy, maybe a green garden salad with it. Now you can see just after 3 cups, this has gotten pretty stiff, so I don't think I'm going to need 5 cups. We'll see, but you can experiment with it. So while it's still easy to stir, I'm going to really stir this well so that it's like a batter and it's well incorporated. It'll make it easier to knead, okay? And you're going to work this dough for about 5 to 8 minutes total. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of that in. And we'll see how we end up here. I may need a little bit more flour, I can see. So how do you know how much flour do you need? Well, until it forms a ball or pulls away from the bowl. So this is still pretty wet, but I want to make sure it's all incorporated before I add more so it doesn't get too dry. So what do you do if it's too wet? You add more flour. What do you do if it's too dry? Just add a little bit more water or milk to it and it'll be fine. Okay, so I'm going to add a scoop at a time. So my scoop is about 1/4 of a cup. So when you're trying to get it stiff, you're going to add about 1/4 cup at a time. That way you're not constantly going back and forth with flour, water, flour, water, flour, water. And, you want to stir it until it starts to pull away, which it's doing right now, until you can get to the point where you can knead it. And I'm going to knead it in the bowl. Actually, that's pretty good. Give it a little bit more, just so that it's not sticking to my hands. So in total, I used about 4.5 cups of flour for this. And I would say that's pretty good. Okay, how do I know that's pretty good? So when I stir it, it's totally pulling away from the bowl into one glob. Okay, so that's telling me it's ready for me to knead it. So I'm going to take the dough off of my spoon here. I don't mess up my counter. And it's always best to flour your hands first when you're kneading so it doesn't stick all over the place. And then you just kind of get in there and press down, okay? And turn it. Now you can knead it on your counter, but you know, why mess up your counter and have extra to clean? I also leave a little bit of flour in the pot there, so if I know in the container that if it starts to get too sticky and it's sticking too much to my hands like it is now, I can just take my scoop and add a little bit more flour, and then I'll get rid of some of the stickiness of the dough. And you may have to do that a couple times until you can get a feel for it. Once you've baked for a while, I am actually going to add the rest of this flour to it. You get a feel for your dough, and you know what the feeling is supposed to be like. It should be silky smooth when you're working with dough, you know, whether it's pizza dough or yeast dough like this. You want to have it so it's smooth, okay? And you'll know what it means to have it smooth when you're dealing with it. It's not going to be sticky. And mixing it in the bowl, you can also get the rest of the flour that's on the side of the bowl picked up and incorporated in. So I think this actually could use a little bit more. See, when it's sticky like this, okay, it's sticking all over your hands, that means you need more flour. Okay, so it's going to be on the high side of 4 cups as opposed to 5 cups. So let me get some more flour in here. I'm going to do the same thing again. Just going to add a little bit at a time. So I've added about another half a cup in there, so I'm probably up to 5 cups now. And you're going to just work that dough. Hopefully that'll be it. So during Lent, Catholics, it's tradition to give something up for Lent. And I heard an interesting thing that my priest told me on Sunday was that you don't necessarily, people think of, oh, I'm giving up chocolate, I'm giving up smoking, things like that. But Pope Francis had made a suggestion many years ago that perhaps it would be better to give up things like swearing or unkind words. You know, so this Lent we decided to try and do that, you know, do something instead of giving up like a food related item, although I'm going to try and give up chocolate, to try and give up swearing or unkind words that you might say to people. And I think that has more of an impact. So I'm adding a little bit more flour to this. Until I get a nice smooth dough. Pretty good. And you'll know that you have a nice smooth dough when you don't have any more dough sticking to your fingers. Now, generally you'll grease a bowl and then cover it and let it rise. I don't always grease my bowl. I usually just leave it in the same bowl that I cooked in. Part of it is I just don't feel like doing the extra dishes, and I never found it necessary. It'll rise just as well in this bowl, and then you don't have to make another mess. So in all, it's going to take about 8 to 10 minutes to knead this and incorporate all the flour. And I do that, you know, I just, as you can see, I'm twisting the bowl. I'm getting everything off the sides. And it's a good workout for your arms. Okay, that's just about worked in. So as you can see, it's one big blob now. So what I will do is I'll put a little bit of olive oil on top of that to coat it, and then turn it over so it doesn't stick. Just a little. About a teaspoon of olive oil on top of that. You're not going to work the olive oil in. All you're doing is keeping it from sticking to the bowl. Kind of like what you do with pizza. It'll just make it easier to get it out. So I've coated the bowl just like that. So I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap and a towel, and I'm going to let it rise for an hour and a half, and I'll be back. Okay, so once you've kneaded it, you're going to cover it with plastic, and then I'm going to cover it with a towel, and I'm going to let it sit in a draft-free place for an hour and a half, and I'll be back. Okay, it's been about 45 minutes to an hour, and I took a peek at my dough, and because it's risen so fast, it's ready to get going. So you don't need to go the full hour and a half if you had a really good proof on your yeast like I did. So it's already at the top. It doesn't need to rise any more than that. So I'm going to remove my plastic off, and see how easy that comes off. And then we're going to punch it down and fill it. So I am going to work on my counter surface. You can also work on wax paper, whatever you want to do. So I'm going to take some flour and put it on my counter. I'm going to be rolling it out into a rectangle. About 14 by 18. Okay. And then I'm going to punch my dough down, and you can see it's really like doubled in size, which is what you want. And just pour it out. You see how nicely that came out of the bowl? And then I'm going to put some flour on top. And then you also want to flour your rolling pin. Okay, so you have plenty of flour and everything. It's going to make it nice and easy. So because it's already round, I don't need to come out that far this way, but I do need to make it longer. So I'm going to come out this way. If you don't have a rolling pin, a wine bottle will do. You can use whatever you need to, or you can just press it down with your fingers if you don't have one. But as you can see, it rolls out quite nicely. And you want to try and keep it as rectangular as you can. You don't have to get it super thin because we're going to be rolling it back up. It's really just to keep it kind of even. Okay, and I'm going to flip it over just so it doesn't stick to my counter. Now to flip, the easiest way to flip something over is to just roll it on your pin, but actually I don't think I need to do that because it's not sticky. So I'm going to roll it. This is pretty thick. So you want to keep it even, okay? Now, what I'm going to put on here, and this is really good, and it's not sticking, it's nice and light and puffy, okay? So, this was actually a Weight Watchers recipe that I adopted. or adapted, I should say, and I actually cut out some of the ingredients and added others. So it called for 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I'm using a little bit less than that, and I doubled the amount of nuts that I'm using, mainly because nuts are really good for you. They're heart healthy, and we're not using the cream cheese, and you can also freeze this too. So go ahead and sprinkle your brown sugar out. Try and get it, all over your cake. And then you're going to need about 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. So I'm just going to liberally sprinkle this onto my dough. Okay? And you have cinnamon in there, so you don't need to go too crazy with it. Alright, and then what I'm adding is my nut mixture. So this is a combination of almonds, walnuts, pecans, pistachios, sunflower seeds, and mini chocolate chips, okay? This is going to be my little baby Jesus, which is a Brazil nut, okay? I'm not wild about baking plastic because of the chemicals that come off in plastic, and also I don't want anybody to break their teeth. So you can just randomly put it any place, and then go ahead and sprinkle your nut mixture. Now you can chop your nuts if you want. Honestly, I'm just being a little bit on the lazy side and put them in whole, and I think they'll be fine. Okay, and just liberally sprinkle that all over. Okay, now what I've gone ahead and done was started my glaze, which was some chocolate chips, about 1/4 cup of chocolate chips, about 3 tablespoons of butter, and I melted it in the microwave, and I'm going to add some rum to that, and I'll show you how to glaze it later. So this is going to be a really delicious cake. Now somebody might say, well, that's not traditional cake, but there are many king cakes with many different fillings to them that you can order. So if you don't like this one, then make your own, figure out a different way to do it. All right, so how do we roll this and how do we turn it into a cake? So I have all my delicious filling inside. So I'm just going to pick up the edge, okay? And I should show you that I've already taken a round pizza pan. I put about 1/4 teaspoon of olive oil. That's all you need. And I just swish it around with my hand. That's what I'm going to bake it on. All right, so now I just take the edges and I push it away from me. And my hand has some olive oil on it, so it's going to help even more. And then I'm just going to roll it. See how nicely that rolls? This is going to be a wonderful cake. Okay. I have some of my nuts here that are coming out, so I'm going to put those back in. My cinnamon sugar, we don't want to lose that. And then the rest of the flour I'm going to get rid of. So I'm going to put my pan here. So clean your surface. Okay. Don't need a rolling pin anymore. Alright, bring my pan in. I'm going to pull that top one up here. And then I'm going to lift this baby, this log, which is quite heavy at this point, onto my pan. And I'm going to press it down, try and get the seam side down. I'm actually just going to roll it on like this and bring it onto my pan this way. That way I won't lose the ingredients. Now some of my special ingredients came out. Going to open up my flap and throw them in. You can even sprinkle it on the top. So I have this giant log, so I'm going to kind of move it around and overlap the ends like this. Okay. And stretch that out a little bit more. It's quite pliable. And this will seal together. You can just kind of pinch it together right now, but that will seal. What you want to do is try and have uniform size of the cake so that it cooks evenly. So just go ahead and push those seams together, and it won't matter because I'll show you what I'm going to do with it. So I'm pinching them together like this. Pinch, 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 pinch. And then I'm just going to push it down into the dough and pinch it again. Now it looks a little bit lopsided. So I'm gonna move some of that down. It's almost like a giant python snake that's eating something. So I'm gonna push that dough together to make it a little bit more uniform. But the dough is nice and smooth, so that's really good. And if you want, I mean, you could let it rest again and let it rise, but I don't think you're gonna need to. So I'm gonna shape that so it's got a nice even shape. And if you have one side that's too wide, just pull it out a little bit and that'll stretch it and make it a little bit bigger for you. And I'm gonna share my cake with a friend and freeze the rest. We're just gonna eat a slice or two tonight, and then we'll put the rest away, and I'll probably bring it out at Easter time and finish it up. But just go ahead and tuck those openings right around. And then you don't even notice it. You just stretch it and pull it so you have a nice round cake. Okay. All right. And then you would take a sharp knife and you're going to slice it. You're going to slice about 1/3 of the way down. And this helps let steam escape. Keeps your loaf from splitting. And later, when we glaze it, we'll be able to pour some of our rum mixture, our rum chocolate glaze into there. And that's going to saturate the whole cake and make it taste absolutely delicious. So, like I said, even though we cut some things out, we added other things in. And it's going to make it quite delicious, and it's a little bit healthier for you. So the tradition with the little Jesus inside, some people say, okay, whoever gets the little Jesus, you can just sprinkle the extra sugar that you have on the top, has to bring the cake for the next feast. But it's generally meant to be good luck for the following year. You know, it's kind of the fun of little traditions. And I like traditions. I think they're really important in cementing your family together, and we don't do enough of that these days because we're so busy with our lives. But if you start these traditions, your kids are going to remember them. I had somebody bring me king cake when I was teaching 5th grade one year, and it was wonderful. I'd never had a king cake before, and this parent was from New Orleans, and she ordered a king cake from New Orleans, 2 of them, and had them shipped to our school, and it was wonderful. And I thought, this is really cool, and I always wanted to bake one, so I'm finally baking one this year. I'm going to pop this in a 375 degree oven for 30 minutes. I will be back then, and I'll show you how to glaze it. Okay, into the oven, 375, setting my timer for 30 minutes. And this is going to be quite a treat for tonight. Okay, our king cake is done and it's ready to decorate. It smells absolutely heavenly. The cinnamon, the chocolate, the nuts. Oh my gosh. Look how huge it is. So like I said, we're only going to have a slice or two, and then we're going to share the rest with some friends. So one of the things for the glaze that I'm going to do first is I had a 1/4 cup of mini chocolate chips, and I added 3 teaspoons of butter. I'm going to add about a 1/4 cup of rum to that. There you go. Any kind of rum you have. I just happen to have white rum. And stir that in. Now I had just remelted this again, so it was nice and warm. So the first thing you're going to do to the cake while it's warm is you want to put your rum glaze on it, okay? And I'll bring this in a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay. And I made some purple food coloring with 10x sugar, confectionate sugar, and a little bit of water. And then I added 1 drop of blue and 2 red, and that makes purple, okay? Now, I didn't want to add a lot of food dyes, so I also had some gold powdered, some gold sprinkled sugar, and some green. I had blue, but I didn't want to mess with traditional colors. So the first thing you're going to do is you want to pour this into the holes of your cake, and it's perfectly fine to let it drizzle. I am leaving it on this pan simply because I cannot find my round platter. I'm still unpacking, believe it or not. So go ahead and drizzle your rum glaze first into the cake, into all the crevices, and you're going to let that saturate in there. Okay. And what I might even do is poke some holes in so that it will totally soak in. And you want to pour that chocolate glaze in all over the top of your cake. Let it drizzle in, and that will, the rum and the chocolate and the sugar will seep into that cake. And it starts to thicken up pretty quickly, so that's fine. Just work quickly while it's warm, okay? And then our decorations begin. So first we're going to take some purple and drizzle that all over the cake. Now, sometimes people do it in strips, sometimes they do it in layers. I'm just doing it kind of haphazard. And so I got my purple on it, kind of melted into my chocolate. And then you can sprinkle stripes. I'm going to do stripes of the green. And then stripes of the orange. They use a lot of it. I don't want to add too much to it. And I am going to add some of this blue because my purple kind of melted in. And I think that'll be okay. It'll show up a little bit better. And people decorate them all different kinds of ways. There is no one way to do it. You know, some people say, well, that's not the way my mom made it. Well, that's fine. We'll try something new. Okay. So I'm going to let that cool. I'm going to let that chocolate glaze melt in. I'll tilt it up so you can see it. But it looks absolutely wonderful. I wish that I had AromaVision because it is heavenly. It smells wonderful. And I'll cut into it and show you what it looks like. Enjoy!